Moonlight spills across the deserted lane, silver and cold, as Casha Winter steps from the rental car onto cracked pavement. Her breath catches on the night air, crisp, biting, charged with secrets. There it lies ahead. The Winter estate, a weathered gray house perched on a wind-scoured bluff, its silhouette etched sharply against roiling fog. Hollow's edge never felt more unwelcoming. She clutches the envelope in her trembling hand. Inside, the key, an antique iron piece, worn smooth by centuries of touch, its intricate wolf head motif staring back as if alive. The moment her fingers, close around its cool heft, a faint vibration hums up her arm, settling beneath her ribcage. Shock ripples through her. A librarian in Boston who lived for quiet stacks and cozy melodies of turning pages, Casha never expected to inherit anything more chilling than overdue fines. Yet here she is, drawn by a death she barely understood. A father she'd never known. A hush falls over the town behind her. She can almost feel the villagers' eyes, dark, accusatory, pressing through the mist. Rumors of Elias Winters. Strange disappearance have swirled for years. They called him phantom, ghost, myth. Now, by law and by blood, the estate is hers. She breathes deeply, tasting pine and damp earth, and steels herself against the ache thrumming beneath her skin. More grief than sorrow, more fear than regret. Something ancient waits within those walls. Footsteps crunch on gravel as Casha crosses the lawn, the key swinging from her fingers like a pendulum of fate. Each step echoes, a metronome to her pounding heart. The front door stands slightly ajar, yawning like a silent invitation, or a trap. Moss-clad shingles sag overhead. Paint peels in long ribbons, whispering of neglect. She hesitates, hand hovering inches from the rusted latch. For a moment, every rational thought flares to life. Turn back. This isn't your world. But duty and curiosity collide within her, propelling her forward. Inside, the foyer greets her with stale air and dim shapes. Dust motes drift in the narrow beam of her flashlight, swirling like restless spirits. The floorboards groan under her weight, each creak a warning. Faded portraits line the walls, severe faces in sepia, eyes that seem to follow her with quiet accusation. Hushed murmurs of past conversations cling to the silence, too low to decipher but impossible to ignore. She pauses at the threshold of the long hallway. Cold seeps through her coat, wrapping around her spine. Her flashlight beam trembles as it reveals the first set of claw marks. Deep, parallel gouges raking the plaster, gouges that slice across door frames and floorboards alike. Dried streaks of something dark stain the wood. Years of violence made permanent. An involuntary shudder runs through Casha as she slides a hand against the wall. The wood is rough, scarred, alive with memory. A soft breath escapes her lips. Half gasp, half prayer. What happened here? The question vanishes almost as soon as it forms, swallowed by oppressive silence. Her pulse thrums in her ears. She should feel grief for her father. Instead, an unsettling thrill dances beneath her fear, a promise of hidden truths waiting to be unearthed. Guided by instinct she barely trusts, Casha follows the hall to a massive oak door. Its iron hinges are rusted, the wood warped by time. She raises the key, inhaling pine-scented dust that drifts from the crack beneath. Her fingertips brush the cold metal teeth. She turns it with a grinding click that seems deafening in the hush. The lock gives way as if it's been expecting her. The door creaks open, revealing the study beyond. Shadows pool in corners. Overturned. Bookshelves lie like wounded beasts on the floor. Papers flutter in a ghostly breeze that shouldn't exist. A threadbare rug crumples askew, its once vibrant patterns lost beneath layers of neglect. And there, etched into every surface, those same claw marks, gnawing at the edges of memory. Casha steps inside, flashlight sweeping across ancient, volumes bound in cracked leather, journals scattered in frantic disarray. The air is thick with musk and something fouler, an animal stench that prickles her senses and raises goose flesh along her arms. She steadies her breath, heart pounding, so fiercely it seems to echo off the walls. Then, just beyond the flashlight's reach, a low rumble reverberates through the room, vibrating against her bones. Her blood runs cold. A voice, deep and raw, whispers her name without moving a lip, a sound that rumbles like distant thunder. Casha. Her hand freezes on the desk, flashlight beam swinging wildly. The key's hum flutters back to life in her pocket, pulsing against her skin like a heartbeat. In that single moment, everything changes. The legacy she thought she inherited, a name, a house, reveals itself as the mechanism of a far darker truth, one that demands she face the echo of a life she never lived. And in the silence that follows, Casha Winter realizes she is no longer merely an heir. She is the key. The wind strikes like an accusation as Casha Winter steps onto the bluff's edge, the ancient house looming above her like a slumbering giant. Gray shingles peel in long, curling ribbons, and the steep roof's angles catch the moonlight, turning the structure into a jagged silhouette against a charcoal sky. Every breath she takes tastes of salt and seaweed, whipped inland by crashing waves that pound the cliff below. In her pocket, the postcards tremble, 3 of them, each bearing her father's looping script and an image of Hollow's Edge under different seasons. Spring's misted tulips, summer's blazing sun, autumn's crimson woods. She's memorized those cryptic verses. Find what waits behind locked doors. Listen to the wind's own voice. Embrace the gift. I left. Each postcard arrived months apart, arriving like a puzzle piece she never ordered. Now, at last, they point here, to Elias Winter's home, a place she never hoped to see. She steps through a thick veil of howling gale, clutching her messenger bag close. The porch rises before her on rickety pillars, floorboards warped from years of salt spray. A lone lantern, its glass cracked and sooty, swings on a tenuous chain, casting a fitful glow. Casha pauses at the top step, heart whispering cautions she can't quiet. You're a librarian, not an explorer. Turn back. But the key's steady hum in her coat pocket drowns out her doubt. Her fingers brush the warped banister, rough as broken bone. Beneath her palm, she imagines centuries of hands, her father's included, sliding across the same grainy wood. That thought knifes through her chest. A man she never knew once stood here, his own pulse mingling with the woods. Quiet memory. She inhales sharply, the wind tearing at her scarf and tangling it around her neck like an imposter's noose. She glances at the front door, its paint chipped to reveal layers of history. Slate gray, cans of rusted lead, and raw oak. A tarnished knocker dangles, shaped like a wolf's maw, teeth bared in eternal warning. Casha lifts her hand, but pauses. The sound of her palm against metal might be the last normal thing she experiences tonight. Behind her, the path she walked recedes into darkness, the town's one gas lamp flickering like a watchful eye. No pedestrian, no neighborly light, just her in the house, separated by the sharp edge of land and a yawning drop to the sea. Hollow's Edge holds its breath, and she feels it. The hush of anticipation that precedes a storm, or something older. She presses forward. Each step echoes across the porch, the wood protesting under her weight. A sudden gust roars through the eaves, setting her hair ablaze around her face and sending a loose shutter crashing against the clapboard. Casha's breath hitches, fear and exhilaration tangoing in her veins. If the gale is angry, this house is furious, alive in its decay, daring her to proceed. At the threshold, she pauses a heartbeat longer than reason allows. She recalls the last postcard's final line. You carry my blood. Claim it. Her father's blood. The words taste metallic in her mind, a promise and a dare entwined. The dead give no second chances. Tonight is her only opportunity to unlock every secret he abandoned. She slides her hand into her coat pocket, fingertips brushing the familiar contours of the iron key. Its hum grows warmer, pulsing in time with her racing heart. Casha lifts, her other hand to the wolf-tooth knocker, the metal cool and unyielding beneath her palm. For a moment, she allows herself to feel the weight of her inheritance, grief, curiosity, and something darker, destiny. With a firm rap, she rouses the house. The hollow thunk reverberates through the door, as if awakening slumbering corridors. Then silence, so complete the wind itself seems to white-knuckle its branches against the windows. Casha's pulse drums in her ears, and then, from the other side, a faint creak, the house answering her summons. The door shifts, opening an inch, enough for shadow to slip through, enough for Casha Winter to step across the threshold and leave her old life on the wind-stripped bluff, forever. Casha's fingers tremble as she lifts the small velvet box from the dusty shelf. The fabric is faded crimson, worn thin where her fingertips brush it. She sets it on a battered writing desk, the surface scratched and pitted by years of neglect. Outside, the wind rattles a loose shutter, sending a single sliver of moonlight dancing across the box's cracked lid. Her pulse hammers. This moment, slipping open the lock, feels like the turning of a page she's long yearned to read. With slow deliberation, she eases the lid open. The velvet gives a faint sigh of relief, and inside rests the key, wrought iron, antique beyond measure. It lies nestled in a shallow depression, its contours highlighted by a sliver of moonlight that slips through the grime-smeared window. She leans in, breath catching as she studies the key's sinuous curves. The bow is shaped like a wolf's head, its snout curled around the shank. Tiny runes trace the blade, worn smooth by countless hands. Something about it seems alive. Cautiously, she lifts the key. Its surface is unnaturally cool, far colder than the autumn air, and impossibly smooth under her fingertips. The metal feels almost liquid, as though molded from mercury. She closes her eyes, palms cupped around the cast iron shape, and for a heartbeat, the key hums. A gentle vibration, almost inaudible, courses up her wrist and settles at the base of her throat. It's not mechanical or electrical. There are no wires, no gears, just an inexplicable thrum that pulses with a life of its own. Her breath hitches. The hum grows stronger, syncing with her heartbeat until she can no longer distinguish where her pulse ends and the key's vibration begins. A memory flares deep in her mind, running through sunlit woods as a child, the laughter of unseen companions, the rustle of leaves under bare feet. But she has no memory of that life. She's never been here. She's never been a child in a forest, and yet, the sensation is as vivid as if she'd lived it. She opens her eyes, the key now glowing faintly silver against the velvet lining. Shadows shift around her, as though the walls themselves lean in to witness this moment. A distant owl hoots, brittle wings cutting through the hush. Casha's throat goes dry. "What are you?" she whispers, voice barely more than a tremor. The key's hum answers with a gentle surge, a vibration that echoes in her bones. Casha pulls the key from the box and holds it aloft. The runes catch, the moonlight, shimmering like living script. Her fingers tighten around the shaft, and she feels a warmth blossom in her palm, an ember of something ancient and powerful. She's both terrified and elated. Questions crowd her mind. Why did her father leave this here? What does it unlock? How did he know she would come? Images flicker at the edges of her vision. Claw marks scored into oak beams, golden eyes glinting. In darkness, whispers carried on a midnight breeze. None of it makes sense. Yet each vision feels as if it's been waiting for her, scripted into her blood long before she was born. She stifles a shiver. Whatever this key opens, it isn't a door in any ordinary house. Tentatively, she presses the key to her palm, letting the hum ripple against her skin. She feels a pull, gentle, insistent, drawing her toward the study door down the hall. Time seems to slow. The wind's howl dims to a murmur. Even the distant crash of waves fades into the background, as though the world holds its breath. Casha exhales, resolve settling like iron in her chest. She carefully closes the velvet box, the key cradled safely in one hand. Every rational instinct screams to flee, to leave Hollow's edge and its haunted inheritance behind. But she cannot. The key's heartbeat echoes her own. It has chosen her as surely as she has claimed it. In the hush that follows, Casha stands, on the brink of revelation, once ordinary librarian, now heir to a legacy she cannot yet comprehend. The key hums softly, a promise and a warning all at once, as she turns toward the corridor. The door to the unknown awaits, and tonight, she will unlock it. Casha steps out onto the winding lane that leads down from the Winter estate, the key's hum still pulsing against her thigh. The night air cools the warmth rising in her chest. In the distance, dim street lamps line the narrow road into Hollow's edge, glowing like watchful eyes. She pauses where the gravel meets worn cobblestones, adjusting the strap of her bag. A silhouette drifts in the lamp's halo, a woman wrapped in layers of wool, head lowered. As Casha approaches, their eyes meet for a fleeting moment, hers, a blank slate of newcomer curiosity, the woman's dark pools of suspicion. Footsteps falter, then quicken, retreating into shadowed doorways. Casha swallows. Elias Winter's name is a key that unlocks every whispered rumor here. On her way to town earlier, she passed a cluster of elderly men huddled on a bench, leaning close enough for her to catch fragments. Disappeared without a trace. Heard at midnight. Wolves on the cliffs. Now lantern light glimmers off their collapsing porches, and she wonders which one is watching her now. She pulls her coat tighter against the wind. The postcard verse pulses in her mind again. Listen to the wind's own voice. But the wind here carries shivers of something darker, the weight of old suspicions, of an inheritance that drags Casha into the heart of every hush. A figure rounds the corner, a gaunt man in oilskin coat, hands shoved deep in pockets. He glances at Casha, head tilting as if catching her scent, salted sea air mixed with something metallic. She can almost hear his silent question. Who are you to claim Winter's blood? Before she can force a reply, he ducks into an alley, footsteps swallowed by night. She continues, each step measured, though her pulse threatens to break rhythm. Half shadows flicker in boarded-up windows, remnants of businesses long since shuttered. The tavern, once a hub of laughter, stands dark, its sign swinging in a lopsided arc. A stray dog emerges, fur matted, nose lifting to sniff the air. It growls low, then disappears under a gate. Even the animals seem wary. At the heart of town, a single lamp burns by the well. Casha hesitates there, drawn by a flicker of movement. A pair of laborers, boots caked in mud, pause mid-conversation. One glances at her, his brow knitting as if calculating. Visitor or trespasser? Their voices drop to a hush too quiet to catch. But their body language, turned shoulders, rigid backs, speaks volumes. The winter wind tosses Casha's hair, and she feels the weight of every hidden gaze. A child's laughter cuts briefly through the tension, a stark reminder of normalcy. She looks toward a second-story window where a small silhouette bounces against the glass. The child's parent must be inside, oblivious to the storm of rumor outside. For a moment, Casha longs to knock on that door, to step into warmth and forget the key's relentless thrum. But the memory of velvet and iron tugs her forward. She passes a row of whitewashed cottages, their gardens sleeping under frost. A neighbor stands at a porch rail, lantern idly swinging. He watches Casha's silhouette against the lamplit street. She forces a steady smile and nod, but the gesture is ghostly, unconvincing. He gives a curt nod in return, eyes flicking, to the shadowed sky, then back to her. It's gratitude for a polite greeting or relief she's moving on. She can't tell which. The edge of town arrives almost without warning. Empty stalls line a closed market square, wooden carts abandoned, in neat rows. Lanterns overhead dangle like forgotten fruit. Here no one stands to stare. The quiet is absolute, as if the village itself recoils. Casha steps into the square, heart pounding in the hollow, and realizes she cannot outrun the weight of that name, Winter, no matter how far she travels. A final whisper drifts on the breeze, soft enough to be a trick of her mind. Elias Winter's daughter. It tugs at her, half memory, half accusation. She stops in the lamplight, breath visible in the chilled air. The key's hum intensifies, and Casha presses her hand to her coat, grounding herself. Rumors and wary glances fade into the black, beyond the lamps, yet the burden remains. She straightens her shoulders. There is no turning back. Hollow's edge may hold 1,000 whispered fears, but Casha Winter now carries her father's legacy in iron and blood. And somewhere between these silent streets and the shadowed cliffs, the truth waits to be claimed. Casha steps through the study door and into the hallway beyond, her flashlight beam cutting a narrow path through the darkness. The air is thick with dust, each desk fan of her light revealing motes that drift like tiny spirits. They swirl in, slow motion, suspended in an eerie stillness, as if time itself hesitates here. Her pulse rockets, and she realizes she isn't merely observing this place. She's trespassing in its memory. Portraits line both sides of the corridor, their stern faces frozen in oil and oak. An ancestor in a cravat scowls down from 1882, his dark eyes seeming to narrow as Casha passes. A matron in faded lace clutches a rosary, ivory fingers skeletal in the dim glow. Each painted gaze weighs upon her shoulders, like a jury passing silent verdict. She yanks in a breath at the sheer intensity of their scrutiny, every heartbeat louder in her ears. Then she sees the gouges, deep parallel rifts in the oak paneling, claw scars that slash from floor to chair rail, wood splinters flaked away, in jagged shards. A streak of something darker, old, oxidized, stains their lower edges. Casha's stomach twists as she leans in, fingertips ghosting over the gouges. The wood is rough and splintered like broken teeth. She imagines some animal of unimaginable size tearing through these boards, hunting in the dark, and her limbs go suddenly limp. She presses back against the nearest wall, hand on her chest to steady the frantic thump of her heart. The light trembles in her other hand, illuminating a set of shallow scratches that crisscross the hallway's length. Claw marks extended into every doorway, every arch. The corridor feels alive, as though that creature could materialize behind her at any moment. She wants to flee, to slam the door and forget this ever happened. But the key in her pocket vibrates, humming softly, demanding she continue. A distant drip echoes from somewhere deep in the shadows. A water leak, or perhaps something more sinister. Each drip lands like a heartbeat, marking seconds with mounting dread. The portrait's eyes catch stray glimmers of light, and Casha can almost hear them whisper, "You aren't supposed to be here." A cold breeze skitters along the floor, ruffling her hair, even though every window is shut. She forces herself forward, step by trembling step. The gouges multiply, spreading like a nightmare fractal, until the walls themselves seem carved by madness. Her foot catches a wood splinter. She stubs her toe and stifles a cry. Pain flares, but it only sharpens her focus. She grips the flashlight tighter, shoulders squared. I have to know, she reminds herself, though her voice is a fragile whisper. At the hallway's end stands an ornate mirror, its glass fractured in a dozen places. Casha halts before it, heart pounding in her throat. She sees herself framed in broken shards, herself pale, with eyes wide as the key's hum pulses through her veins. In those cracked reflections she glimpses something else, a flicker of predatory urgency buried beneath her fear, an inheritance more profound than any house or heirloom. Behind her, the hallway exhales a low, sighing creak, as if acknowledging her arrival. Dust motes swirl upward, dancing in the fractured light. In the ancient wood and painted stairs, the truth waits, hungry and watchful. And Casha Winter realizes that every step forward binds her more tightly to this place, and to the monster hidden just beyond the shadows. Moonlight filters through grimy windows, painting the living room in silver and shadow. Casha Winter steps across the threshold, and her boots sink into a threadbare Persian rug so faded its once vibrant reds have bled into muted tans. Each footfall raises a whisper of dust that drifts in her flashlight's glow. The rug's intricate patterns, floral vines and interlaced medallions, are half erased by age and neglect, as though time itself has chewed away the colors. Her gaze climbs to the hearth. A vast stone fireplace dominates one wall, its cold, granite face etched with centuries of soot and stories. The mantel is jagged, a monolith of hard angles, and the hearth's gaping maw yawns empty and dark, as if inhaling all warmth from the room. Casha inches closer, fingertips brushing the rough stone. It's slick with a thin patina of mold, or perhaps something more organic. The chill radiates through her glove-lined fingers, seeping into her bones. Above the fireplace, thick wooden beams span the ceiling like skeletal limbs. Deep claw scars gouge the oak, grooves scored by something with immense power. The wood splinters outward, raw muscle in grain form, testimony to violence long past yet still humming in the air. She runs her hand along one beam and flinches as the wood feels oddly warm, an echo of the key's pulse or her own blood racing. A low, musky scent drifts through the room, something between damp fur and decaying leaf litter. It coils around her senses, primal and unsettling, awakening memories she never lived. The taste of cold breath on fur, the press of animal muscle under her palm. Goose flesh ripples across her arms. She inhales carefully, trying to separate mildew from something more feral. In one corner, a high-backed armchair perches under tattered drapes. Its upholstery is shredded in places, revealing spring-coiled innards rusted to iron. Claw marks mar the leather arms, sinuous gouges that weave like vine thorns. The chair looks abandoned mid-flight, a snapshot of panic. Casha imagines the original occupant fleeing, only to be overtaken by something terrible. Across the room, a heavy oak coffee table lies overturned, one leg broken and splayed. Paper fragments flutter beneath it, yellowed ledger pages scrawled in ink now smeared and illegible. A thick copper candlestick sits nearby, dented and blackened by flame. No candle remains, only the scorched wick stub hints at long extinguished light. Her flashlight picks out a grand piano in the far corner, its lid propped open like a gaping jaw. The ivory keys are cracked and stained, a handful splintered away entirely. Dust coats the bench, and as she sweeps her hand across it, a small cloud rises, motes dancing like spectral dancers. She presses an index finger to a key and releases. A hollow click echoing through the emptiness, as though the room itself is sighing. Every surface seems to sigh. The wallpaper peels at the edges, curling in brittle scrolls. Beneath it, the plaster is marred by long, dark streaks that drip toward the floor like slow tears. The walls feel alive, as if breathing in time with her ragged inhalations. The hush is oppressive, broken only by the distant groan of settling wood and the whisper of wind outside. Casha's heart hammers so loudly she questions whether it's her own pulse or something somewhere deeper in the house. A flicker of movement catches her eye. A moth, pale as ash, flutters against the chipped window panes. It beats its wings desperately, drawn to the light. She watches it for a moment, wondering if she too is trapped in some long-forgotten snare. She steps back, the rug's fraying threads tugging at her heel. The fireplace seems to stare back, an empty maw promising nothing but cold. The cloth-scarred beams loom overhead like sentinels, and the scent of decay tightens around her throat. This room, once grand, has surrendered to time and violence, its grandeur buried beneath dust and rot. Casha Winter exhales softly, steeling herself. Every detail here, moldy stone, shredded fabric, savage gouges, speaks of a story she must follow, a darkness she must confront. She lifts the iron key, its hum a beacon against the hush, and moves deeper into the forgotten grandeur, determined to uncover the truth hidden in the decay. Casha's pulse is a frantic drumbeat as she moves from the living room, pepper spray gripped in her trembling hand. The hallway beyond stretches into darkness, each step stirring motes of dust that drift in the beam of her flashlight. Every muscle in her body tenses, primed for the unknown. At the far end stands the study door, slightly ajar, gap widening like a silent invitation. A low, cavernous rumble reverberates through the wood, sending tremors along the floorboards beneath. Her boots. The sound is neither animal nor mechanical. It thrums in her bones, a deep vibration so ancient it feels woven into the house's very foundation. She raises the pepper spray, thumb resting on the trigger, and exhales in slow defiance. She's clutched this slender canister since she arrived, a flimsy talisman against whatever lurks here. But now it feels as useless as a child's toy. The rumble deepens, rolling through the walls and threatening to swallow the last echoes of her courage. Casha's knuckles whiten around the can. She can taste her own fear in the back of her throat. The study door's crack breathes out darkness. The key's hum pulses in her coat pocket, in staccato sync with her heartbeat. She steps closer, inhaling a spike of musky cold that leaks through the gap, an animal stench tinged with old paper and something metallic. Her senses flare. The scent of leather, the ghost of tobacco smoke, and that unmistakable undercurrent of raw, predatory power. Her flashlight sweeps across the door's surface. Splintered wood edges, claw-like grooves, and a smear of dark stain, dried and cracked. This is no ordinary library. This is a lair. The rumble crescendos, then lingers in a pregnant pause. Casha's breath catches. She swallows, forcing her muscles to uncoil. "Here goes nothing," she whispers, voice raw. She presses her body against the door, pushing it just enough to slip inside, spray held ready like a lifeline. Her other hand steadies the door frame, nails digging into the wood. Inside, the study is a storm of shadows. Overturned desks lie like fallen giants, books scattered in hopeless arcs, papers drifting in drafts that seem to breathe. The rumble didn't come from the door. It emanates from the room's heart. A massive oak desk has been cracked in two, its center split by some unthinkable force. Gaps in the floorboards run like scars, as though whatever crashed here tore straight through the earth. Casha's flashlight trembles as it settles on the room's center. There, on the desk, sits an ancient journal. Leather cover torn, pages splayed like broken wings. The rumble seems to radiate from its open spine, that same low vibration humming in the air. She inches forward, pepper spray raised, every nerve alight. Her boot nudges a scattered page. She freezes as it flutters upward, landing at her feet. One single word scrawled across the page in faded ink, simple and chilling. Awaken. The journal trembles. The rumble shifts pitch. no longer slow and deep, but urgent, angrier. Casha's grip tightens around the pepper spray. Her rational mind screams to run, to vault back through the hallway and abandon this nightmare. Yet curiosity, fierce and relentless, anchors her in place. Something shifts behind her. A soft scrape, against a bookshelf. She spins, spray raised, heart lodged in her throat. Dust motes swirl in the beam. No creature emerges. Only the hulking shadows of bookcases and the shuddering journal at her feet. The air tastes of ozone and old leather. In the hush that follows, the rumble dissipates into a low hum, synchronized with the key in her pocket. Whatever power drums through these walls now throbs in her palm. She drops the spray, hand dipping into her coat for the iron key. The journal's pages flutter again, as if beckoning. Casha swallows hard, her throat tight with dread and exhilaration. Tonight, she crossed a threshold she cannot uncross, and the house, alive with secrets, has finally answered her call. Casha barely registers the thud of her own heartbeat as a figure steps into the study's fractured light. His silhouette is tall, towering, almost predatory, and every step he takes seems to pulse in time with the low hum of the key in her coat. Dust motes swirl around him, haloed by the moonlight that slices through a broken window. When he emerges fully, the room's chaos fades into the periphery of her vision. He stands before her, granite-chiseled features carved by moonlight and shadow. High cheekbones catch stray beams, casting deep grooves beneath his jawline. His long dark hair falls in loose waves to his shoulders, strands drifting like raven feathers. The remnants of his clothing, dark, form-fitting fabric, cling as if engineered to highlight every sinew of his broad chest and lean, powerful arms. Casha's breath catches when her flashlight settles on his eyes. Molten gold, liquid fire, blazes, in the hollows of his skull, smoothing the raw intensity of his expression into something almost reverent. They don't just look at her. They seem to weigh her, strip away her armor, peer past her own bones into the core of who she thinks she is. A shiver races up her spine as the flames in his gaze leap closer, flickering with an intelligence that is at once wild and ancient. She raises her flashlight in a weak attempt at defense, but the beam trembles in her hand, tracing outlines that fade whenever he shifts. The key in her pocket stutters its own gentle thrum, as though recognizing an echo in him. Casha's lips part, but no words come. Her librarian's composure dissolves in the heat of his stare. He breathes, a low exhalation that rustles loose, papers in the immediate near darkness. The sound resonates deep in her chest, a distant thunder rolling across storm-shy hills. "You came," he murmurs, his voice thick with ancient timbre. The words aren't a question. They're an invocation, pressing the dark air into her lungs. Her mind scrambles for sense. How does he know her? Who is he? Fear stalks her spine, but beneath it pools a fierce spark of curiosity. All her careful rationalizations, pepper spray, logical deduction, cold scholarship, feel laughably inadequate now. This man is beyond anything she ever anticipated inheriting with her name. He glides forward, each movement fluid and certain, as though he's walked this world in every form imaginable. His gaze never wavers from her, and the golden glow in his eyes intensifies, casting rippling reflections against the iron key he must sense in her pocket. The thrum in her hand spikes, and a tremor arcs through her arm. "Who are you?" she manages, voice trembling but determined. He inclines his head, dark hair brushing his forehead. "I am Reys." Simple, direct, as if her entire life's mystery distills into that single name. The syllable rolls off his tongue like a sigh of wind through trees. "And you," he continues, stepping so close that she can feel the dry heat of his breath, "are the reason I waited." The words hang between them, pulsing with secrets he refuses to share. Casha's pulse threatens to drown out the slow creaking of the floor, but she forces herself to stand firm. Every instinct screams to run, but she's already too deep in his orbit, bound by curiosity and whatever inexplicable link the key breathes to her. He extends a hand, strong, scarred knuckles rumored to have fought battles older than time, hovering just inches from her face. The contrast between his rough palm and her trembling cheek sets her nerves ablaze. She should recoil, but instead, she lifts her hand in answer to his silent demand, fingertips grazing the heavy warmth of his skin. His gaze flickers then, a spark of something unreadable, approval, warning, invitation, and in that instant, the room's old turmoil recedes, leaving only the two of them framed in the fractured moonlight. No explanation, no promise. Only the charged silence and his molten gold eyes reflecting back a destiny she never saw coming. The final echo of his voice drifts through the charged hush. "Welcome home, Casha Winter." And in that moment, the key's hum crescendos into her blood, binding her to this stranger's unanswered questions, and to the truth he holds just beyond her reach. Reys' words hang in the air like a challenge, each syllable vibrating with weight. "You've inherited more than you realize." Casha's heart staggers, as though someone dropped a stone into her chest. She swallows hard, mind racing for a foothold in this shifting ground. "What do you mean?" she manages, voice small against the cavernous hush of the study. He steps closer, molten gold eyes never breaking their fierce hold. "Your father was no ordinary man," Reys says, voice low as a distant rumble. "He was the last of his kind." She blinks, confusion rippling across her features. The breath she inhales tastes metallic, as if the key in her pocket bleeds into the atmosphere. "Last of his kind?" Her words feel absurd, thrusting, her back toward childhood fairy tales of monsters and moonlit transformations. "I'm a librarian. He was a recluse. That's all I know." Reys' jaw tightens, shadows etching deeper into his countenance. "He hid his true nature, even from you. He kept every secret locked behind these walls." His hand sweeps across the broken desk, fingers brushing against the cracked leather of the journal. "Your inheritance isn't money or land. It's his legacy, and his burden." Casha's breath comes in shallow bursts, each exhale rattling her spine. Legacy. Burden. Words that should dangle over a memorial plaque instead slam into her like an avalanche. Her father, gentle phantom of postcards and hushed childhood fantasies, concealed a life that eclipses every mundane truth she ever held. She steps back, pressing her palm to the fractured window pane. The moonlight fractures in the glass, scattering across her skin. Outside, the wind tears at the curtains, a voice echoing through trees. Every instinct screams retreat, but her feet remain planted. "Why?" she whispers. "Why would he hide this from me?" Reys' gaze flickers, fleeting vulnerability softening his fierce mask. "Protection. He loved you enough to keep you safe from those who would hunt him, and now hunt you." Pain flickers in his eyes, an unspoken history of battles lost and blood spilled. "He thought this place would shield you. He was wrong." Her head swims. Hunters, blood, secrets. She grips the sash of her coat, knuckles paling. All her life she's lived by cataloging facts, indexing stories, preserving histories. Yet here stands Reys, unraveling the single narrative she thought she knew, her father's life. And no amount of research could have prepared her. Casha's gaze drifts to the journal lying open on the desk. The pages gape like a wounded heart, inked scrawls dancing in a language she doesn't understand. All this was his life? She asks, voice raw. "These entries, these symbols, these..." She stops, words failing as a fresh tremor of the house rattles the windows. Reys nods. He documented everything. His bloodline, the transformations, the hunters who pursued him, and the key. His hand dips into his coat, revealing an iron charm identical to the one shimmering in Casha's pocket. He intended for you to find it when the time was right. She reaches for the key, fingers brushing against Reys' calloused knuckles as he holds it out. The metal hums against her skin, thrumming louder now, an awakening heartbeat. The vibration surges through her, pulsing at the base of her skull. That same shiver flecked her childhood dreams, the half-remembered flush of running paws and moonlit forests. Suddenly, everything clicks into place. Postcards that arrived like breadcrumbs, hushed rumors, the inheritance she never wanted. Tears prick at the corner of her eyes. Frustration, grief, and something fiercer churn together. Anger at her father's, silence, sorrow for the child she could have been, and a fierce surge of responsibility she never asked for. So, I'm... what? The heir to his curse? She chokes out. Reys' golden eyes soften, and he dips his head the slightest fraction. Heir to his power, his lineage, his responsibility. You are more than a librarian tonight. You're the keystone. Her breath catches in her throat. Keystone, center stone of an arch that holds everything together. The word brands itself onto her soul. If she fails, the entire structure, her family's legacy, this hidden world, could collapse. Fear spikes, but beneath it, a spark ignites. Determination. She's not merely a passive inheritor, she is its guardian now. Casha straightens, gripping the key like a lifeline. Then show me, she demands, voice stronger than she feels. Show me what he tried to hide. Reys inclines his head once, a silent vow passing between them. In the wavering moonlight, the journal's pages stir, beckoning. The future and the truth await, and Casha Winter steps forward to claim them. The roar of the ocean drifts up from the cliffs, a relentless percussion that undercuts every word. Each wave shatters against jagged rocks far below, sending plumes of spray glittering in the moonlight. Casha Winter feels the thunder in her chest echo that crash, a tide of fear rising with every swell. Reys stands motionless beside her, shoulders squared against the dim lantern glow. His golden eyes flick to the open journal, then back to her face. Elias Winter was more than a man, he says, voice hushed yet resonant, like some ancient bell tolling in the dark. Casha's breath hitches. More than a man. She presses her fingertip against the key's cool iron, seeking its hum for reassurance. Her mind rebels at the words. My father, more than a man? She forces out a laugh that tastes bitter. You keep saying that, she snaps, voice brittle as the wind-battered walls. But what does it mean, Reys? Werewolves, magic, monsters. Reys' gaze darkens, as if he wrestles with his own words. He steps closer, the faint scent of pine and ozone trailing behind him, a stark reminder of the forest sanctuary she left behind, of a world she never asked to join. He carried powers you cannot imagine, he murmurs. Strength, speed, senses, but also a bloodline older than Hollow's Edge itself, a legacy of shadows and light, and a debt owed by both. Her heart staggers at the weight of it. Debt owed. Legacy of shadows and light. The key's hum surges in her pocket, pressing her to believe. Yet every rational impulse screams that she's chasing fairy tales. Debt, she hisses, stepping back. The floor tilts beneath her as another crescendo of surf rips through the night. You're not answering me. Panic flares, hot and unbidden. Her pulse spikes, and she clutches the desk edge to keep from swaying. Reys' jaw clenches. He glances at the shattered desk, the claw-scarred beams overhead, and the overturned chairs splintered like broken wills. Tonight isn't the time, he says, voice low and firm. There are dangers lurking. hunters who scour the coast for those who bear winter's blood. If you knew everything now, you would run, and that would doom us all. Her chest tightens. Running never crossed her mind, only pressing forward to uncover the truth. Doom us all? She repeats, eyes blazing. Or protect me from it. I deserve to know the truth about my father, who he was, what I've inherited. Her voice trembles with both fear and resolve. Reys meets her gaze, those molten prisms unflinching in the lantern's flicker. For a heartbeat, she sees raw conflict in him, as though every step closer to her reveals a new wound in his own past. You'll learn, he vows, hand hovering just above her arm. When you're ready. When the time is right. A surge of frustration crashes over Casha as fierce as the waves below. Tell me now, she urges, her words ricocheting off the study's fractured glass. I can't stand half-truths and riddles. Not after tonight. He lowers his hand, respect and regret mingling in his eyes. I would if I could, Reys says, voice strangled by conflict. But some wounds cannot bear the light until we know how to heal them. He steps back into the shadows, warm tones of pine and storm tossed aside. Rest for now. Tomorrow we begin to unravel the rest. Casha's chest tightens as his silhouette dissolves into the dark. The key in her pocket thumps against her thigh, a heartbeat that demands answers she cannot yet grasp. The tidal roar presses in, waves smashing below like a reminder that time and tide wait for no one. Least of all, an heir to a legacy both wondrous and deadly. She turns away from the receding figure, mind aflame with questions. The journal lies open on the broken desk, its pages fluttering in the draft like desperate messengers. Casha Winter knows tonight has changed her forever. And yet the truth she seeks remains just beyond reach, locked away in the echoes of a name she has only begun to understand. Casha's shaking fingers hover above the journal's cracked leather cover. Moonlight spilling through the grimy window highlights its embossed title in faded gold leaf. Chronicles of the Lupin Blood. Her breath catches, ragged and shallow, as she reaches out to touch the letters, ancient script that promises revelations beyond imagination. Beside the journal, a cluster of dried herbs lies scattered, twisted sprigs of sage, brittle thyme, and dark pine needles that crumble at her. Touch. The scent is faint but unmistakable, earthy, wild, charged with something untamed. Casha inhales, and the aroma dredges up half-whispered legends she once dismissed. Stories of shape-shifting wolves under the full moon, of bloodlines older than human kingdoms. Legends she thought belonged to pulp novels, bedtime campfire tales, not her father's private study. She flips the journal open with trembling care. The pages are brittle, edges curling as if recoiling from the light. Her flashlight beam dances across spidery handwriting, symbols woven through paragraphs, and detailed diagrams of bone structures, both human and lupine. One sketch shows a human silhouette fragmented into wolf's anatomy, muscles and sinews mapped like a butcher's blueprint. Underneath, a single line of text in careful cursive. When blood calls Moonlight's name, the body becomes covenant and curse. A jolt of terror arcs through Casha's spine. She barely registered the rumble in the study, the clawed gouges that scar the walls, but now it all converges here in black ink. These pages aren't mere fantasy. They're a manual for transformation. A biology lesson on metamorphosis. Her father's biology. Her flashlight beam slides over a second entry. A recipe of herbs. Sage to calm the mind, pine to sharpen the senses, thyme to tether the soul. Beneath it, a small notation. For wolves in fear, burn stalks at first light. She glances at the brittle sprigs, still lying where he last placed them. A ritual left unfinished, waiting for the next heir to carry on the rites. Terror wells in her chest until it feels like claws tearing her ribs. Werewolves, real, blood-sworn shapeshifters, no longer belong to the realm of myth. They inhabit her father's world. Her world now. Casha backs away, the journal slipping from her grip and thudding against the desk with a hollow echo. The dried herbs flutter to the floor in a sepia confetti. She presses her hand against her mouth, choking back an involuntary gasp. The layers of disbelief peel away. Every postcard he sent, every cryptic message about finding what waits behind locked doors, points to this moment. She betrayed her own skepticism, laughed off the notion, and now stands on the threshold. Of terror made flesh, her flashlight tremors, beam bouncing across the ruined floor. She forces herself to step forward, gaze skimming the diagrams again. The journal's opening dedication catches her eye, ink slightly darker than the rest. To my daughter, when the moonlight finds you, remember, blood is more than memory. It is destiny. Shit, she whispers, knees threatening to buckle. Her father. He wrote this for her. He knew she would come. He knew she would need to learn these secrets, and now she must. Her pulse hammers as she lifts the journal again, fingers sliding over the fine cracks in its spine. A sudden draft stirs the pages, flipping them to a section titled, The Wolf's Awakening. She reads 2 choked sentences. The first shift is agony and ecstasy entwined. Bones crack, flesh tears. A howl births the new self. Her breath catches. A howl, her howl, echoes faintly through the study's broken walls, distant and haunting. She spins, flashlight, beam slicing through shadows. The room stands empty, but the echo remains, reverberating off shattered glass and claw-scarred beams. The key in her pocket vibrates, urgent and insistent. Casha's rational side recoils, screaming to run, but her feet are rooted to the journal-strewn floor. She can't unsee these words. She can't unknow that her blood carries the Lupin legacy. The ink on these pages has become her inheritance, far more potent than any house or heirloom. Tears blur her vision as she clutches the journal to her chest, the dried herbs in her other hand. Panic and wonder crash together in her mind. She is no longer the librarian threading quiet stacks. She is the last of Elias Winter's line, the next guardian of ancient power. And as the moonlight shifts behind gathering clouds, she realizes there is no safe return to ignorance. The legends of Lupin Blood are alive here, and she is their heir. Casha's voice cracks in the hush of the study, barely more than a breath. We're wolves? The words hang between them, fragile and impossible. Her fingers clench the battered journal against her chest, knuckles whitening. In the stillness, the only answer is Reys' steady inhale, the faint rasp echoing through the debris of overturned books and splintered wood. He meets her gaze, golden eyes unwavering. Moonlight glints off his hair as if woven with starlight. Yes, he says simply, you carry Lupin blood, the blood of wolves. Her world spins. Darkness pools at the edges of her vision, and the walls of the study seem to tilt. A rumble of laughter, hers, incredulous, echoes hollowly in her ears. That's insane. Her voice trembles more with wonder than fear now. My father, he was a man. Reys steps forward, each movement deliberate, a silent anchor in the storm of her thoughts. He was both, he whispers. In human shape, yes, but in blood and spirit, a wolf. He lifts a hand, almost reverent, and brushes a loose strand of hair from her forehead. You are that wolf, Casha Winter. Dizziness crashes through her like a wave, hot and unrelenting. She sways on the balls of her feet, heart hammering as if trying to escape her ribs. The key in her coat pocket throbs against her thigh, a heartbeat tangled with her own. She presses a palm to the broken desk, fingertip grazing a smear of dried ink shaped like claws. The lines blur, and she blinks hard, struggling to ground herself. Images burst behind her eyelids. Moonlight dancing. On fur. Claws raking deep into oak. A howl piercing the coastal night. Her librarian's world, quiet shelves, whispered pages, collapses into myth. She tries to breathe, but each inhale tastes of wild earth and salt spray, as if the cliffs below have risen to claim her. Footsteps thunder from down the hall. Hers or his, she can't tell. She clutches the journal tighter, pages creasing under her grip. How? When? The words tremble free. How is any of this possible? Reys's golden eyes soften. He gently takes the journal from her trembling hands and places it on a nearby table. It began long before you were born, he says, voice low as a forest's sigh. Your father discovered his lineage and fought to protect you from it. He believed he could keep the curse, if you feel it as a curse yet, contained. Casha's knees buckle. She sinks onto a toppled chair, the wood groaning under her weight. Her vision swims with half-remembered childhood nights, the niggling, sense she never truly belonged. So all those times I felt different. It wasn't imagination? Her voice cracks with relief and grief. It was real. Reys kneels before her, hands hovering near her shoulders, careful not to touch until she's ready. It's real, he confirms. Your senses will sharpen, your strength will grow, and one day the change will come. Perhaps on your first full moon. A fresh wave of panic surges through Casha, white-hot and electrifying. A shift, she breathes, voice tight with terror and awe. I become a wolf? He nods, solemn as a priest. A wolf who can think, remember, choose. But it won't be gentle. Bones will crack, flesh will tear. You will howl. Silence crashes down. The journal's pages flutter as if caught in an unseen breeze. Casha presses her palms to her temples, willing the reality away. The chair beneath her feels too small, too fragile to hold what she has become. Her lungs ache. Her vision dims around the edges. Finally, she exhales, a shuddering gust that scatters dust motes into the shaft of moonlight. What choice do I have? She whispers. I don't. Reys's expression softens with understanding. None, he says gently. But you can learn. You can control it. You can choose the kind of wolf you become. Her breathing slows, each inhale a tether to sanity. She glances at the dusty journal, at the scattered herbs waiting to guide her transformation. Then she looks back at Reys, his presence both terrifying and reassuring. In that moment, Casha Winter makes a silent vow. She will master her Lupin Blood. She will claim her father's legacy, not as a curse, but as power. And though the path ahead shimmers with danger and uncertainty, one thing remains clear. She is no longer merely human. She is the wolf her father became, and the heir to a truth that can no longer be denied. A distant howl rattles the study's broken windows, a keening cry that seems both animal and sentinel. Reys's golden eyes harden as he steps beside Casha, shoulders squared against the gathering storm. They're coming, he murmurs, voice hushed but urgent. Hunters. Century-old hunters who've trailed my kind since the first Lupin emerged from legend. They smell our blood on the wind. Outside, the wind surges through shattered panes, whipping the tattered curtains into frenzied dance. Each gust carries the scent of salt and pine, but beneath that is something sharper: smoke, blood, iron. Casha's heart hammers, every beat a thunderclap in her ribs. The study's shadows stretch and contract as moonlight tilts through the storm-stung sky. Hunters? She breathes, voice trembling. They actually exist? The journal still lies open on the desk, its secrets spilled like sacrilege. She presses her hand to the iron key at her hip, its hum now a frantic pulse that echoes the wind's fury. Reys nods, gaze drifting to the claw-scarred hallway beyond. They've hunted our kind in every age. Packs scattered, bloodlines broken. Your father fought them, and more than once nearly lost everything. His voice goes distant, burdened by regret. Tonight, they sense our presence. They'll be on the cliffs below, combing the coves. We have little time. Thunder rattles the rafters, and dust drifts in swirling eddies. Casha's fear ripples, outward, white-hot and paralyzing. But beneath it stirs something else, an undeniable tug of destiny. The key vibrates against her thigh, urging her forward. Her breaths come shallow, each inhale a battle between panic and purpose. What can I do? She whispers, voice tight with both dread and resolve. Am I ready? The very thought of her first shift, bones cracking, skin stretching, from journal pages to nightmare reality sends a tremor through her limbs. Reys steps closer, the scent of pine and storm clinging to him like a promise. He reaches for her hand, calloused fingers brushing her palm. The touch is electric, anchoring her against the tumult, reminding her she's not alone. A wave of calm surges through her chest, as though his strength flows into her veins. Beyond, the study door, the forest wind picks up, a keening lament that rattles dead leaves in the rafters. Casha glances at the snapped branches painted on the walls, at the overturned desks. This once safe sanctuary now feels like the eye of an approaching hurricane. Reys' grip tightens on her hand. We'll face them together, he says, each word steady as stone. The hunters fear the bond we share, an alpha and her mate. If I stand with you, they will hesitate. His golden eyes meet hers, wildfire behind every flicker. But we must move now. They will not wait. Casha's pulse slows against his steady heartbeat. The strange pull she felt all night, this tether of iron and blood, warms her from within. Suddenly, fear is a fuel, ignition for courage she never knew she possessed. She straightens, brushing dust from her coat. Then lead the way, she says, voice firm despite the quiver. Reys inclines his head, a flicker of relief softening his fierce expression. Together they push open the study door, stepping into the claw-scarred hallway that trembles with ancient violence. The wind follows them, hissing through broken window panes like a warning. Motes of dust spin in their flashlight's beam, ghosts of the past that whisper of war and blood. Casha's grip tightens on Reys' hand as they cross the threshold. Outside, the thunder of waves on the cliffs grows louder, mingling with an urgent rustle of leaves and distant footsteps among the trees. The hunters are already moving, phantoms on the horizon, drawn by Lupin breath and Moonlight's call. In that charged moment, Casha Winter, librarian turned heir to an ancient bloodline, feels her world shatter and reforge. Fear crashes against her like a breaker, but destiny's pull is stronger. She will stand, wolf blood awakened, by Reys' side, and together they will face the hunters on the horizon, or perish in the storm they unveil. Moonlight filtered through the ragged clouds as Casha and Reys slipped out of the study's shattered threshold. The wind carried the tang of salt and storm from the cliffs, mingling with the heavy sweetness of pine needles. Each step took them deeper into the forest's embrace, where moonlight painted silver paths on a carpet of damp earth and fallen needles. Casha's city-tuned senses rebelled at first. She listened for sirens in the distance, the hum of streetlights, but all she heard now was the susurrus of wind through pine boughs and the steady slap of her boots on moss-soft ground. A single raindrop splattered on her cheek, cool and pungent, stirring thrill and dread in equal measure. They moved in silence, Reys' hand guiding hers. His presence was a comforting pulse against her side, a reminder she wasn't alone in this wild cathedral. The storm's breath rattled skeletal, branches overhead sending a cascade of needles rattling down like ghostly applause. Casha tilted her face upward, letting the cold mist kiss her lashes. With each step, the forest came alive under her fingertips. Moss curled in intricate spirals on fallen logs, slick cobwebs dripped dew like silver thread. She inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with the heady perfume of pine resin, earthworm, and rain-softened leaf litter. Every sense stretched. The crack of a distant twig sounded like a rifle shot. The skitter of a small creature's paws hinted at hidden life just beyond her sight. Reys paused at a jagged stone outcropping, hand sliding along the rough, lichen-clad surface. He pressed against a barely visible notch in the rock wall, and a section of bramble-choked undergrowth parted, revealing a narrow path. The moonlight pooled beyond in a secluded glade, a sanctuary Reys had promised. They stepped through, the living curtain into the clearing. A ring of ancient oaks stood sentinel, their roots woven like gnarled fingers around a natural spring that shimmered under the moon's pale glow. The air here was different, calm, charged with something old and protective. Tiny orbs of luminescent. Fungus pulsed softly along the base of tree trunks, casting an otherworldly glow across the damp ground. Casha exhaled, the tension draining from her shoulders. She sank to one knee, tracing a finger through the spring's shallow water. It rippled like liquid glass, reflecting her wide-eyed face. The taste of rainwater was crisp and pure, a far cry from the chlorine-tinged tap water of her Boston apartment. Here, every drop felt alive. Above, the storm's roar softened to distant grumbles. A few raindrops pattered against the canopy, each one a delicate percussion on leaves and bark. Casha closed her eyes, letting her senses entwine with the forest's own rhythm, her heartbeat matching the spring's gentle burble, her breath syncing with the breeze's whisper. Reys built a small fire from fallen branches, the crackle of flame shattering the hush. He crouched beside her, the glow flickering across his granite-chiseled features. The warmth seeped into her bones, banishing the last shiver of fear. She reached out, letting the heat brush her fingers. When the fire settled to glowing embers, Casha rose and stretched stiff limbs. The forest seemed to exhale around her, as if acknowledging her presence. In the hush, she heard the soft pad of steps. No threat, but a companionable approach. Reys emerged from the shadows, a small cloak of fresh moss and pine across his arm, to drape around her shoulders. Casha swallowed against the surge of emotion. City life had taught her efficiency, logic, and deadlines. None of that mattered here. In this moonlit refuge, she discovered a wildness she'd only glimpsed in dreams. The crisp bite of pine-scented air, the pulse of earth beneath her feet, the ancient heartbeat of Lupin Blood stirring within her. She turned to Reys, golden eyes blazing in the firelight. "Thank you," she whispered. No words could capture the relief of sanctuary or the wonder of discovery. He offered a small, knowing smile and a silent nod. Together, they sat on a fallen log, side by side in the soft glow of embers and fungus. Above them, the storm made peace with the moon, and below, the forest held its breath, vigilant, protective, and alive. Here, in the hidden sanctuary, Casha Winter began to understand. The wild was not something to fear, but a home she was destined to claim. The night air is thick with anticipation as Casha steps into the clearing, her boots crunching softly on the frost-tipped grass. Beyond the ring of oaks, the moon hangs low, a luminescent sentinel casting silver light over a gathering of wolves, and humans gathered around a crackling campfire. Each face is outlined in flickering amber, sharp features shadowed and revealed in equal measure. Casha's breath catches as the heat from the flames dances over her jacket, and the scent of pine smoke weaves through the hush. At the heart of the circle stands AA, Alpha, matriarch, sentinel of this ancient line. Her silver hair falls like a waterfall of moonlight over strong shoulders cloaked in a heavy fur mantle. Aa's eyes, a piercing ice blue, assess Casha with a curiosity that bristles like static. She steps forward, every movement measured, the firelight gleaming on the intricate silver circlet atop her head, a crown of ancestral authority. "Welcome, Casha Winter." Aa's voice carries across the clearing, resonant and calm. The name hangs in the air, echoing in the crackle of dying embers. Daughter of Elias Winter. A ripple moves through the pack. Faces once turned outward now swivel to study Casha's expression. Some wary, others almost reverent. She feels the weight of their gaze, 1,000 unspoken questions pressing like stones against her chest. She swallows, voice barely a whisper as she replies, "Thank you, Alpha." Aa nods once, slow and solemn. Behind her, the pack members, men and women of varying ages and builds, shift, revealing scars both physical and emotional. A warrior, with a missing fingertip, a young woman whose jaw tattoos glint in the fire's glow, an elder whose stooped posture belies a lifetime of battles fought and survived. Each bears the telltale mark, faint, silvery on their skin, the legacy of the Lupin bloodline. Casha's gaze drifts to their shoulders, searching for the same mark on her own skin. Beneath her coat, she feels the faint hum of iron against flesh, a promise of power she has only just begun to understand. The realization tightens her throat. They see her not as a librarian, but as the heir to a lineage woven through centuries of twilight hunts and moonlit rituals. Aa gestures toward an empty rock beside her. "Join us," she commands gently. Casha steps forward, each footfall a drumbeat in her ears. She settles on the stone, the cold surface seeping through her jeans, grounding her in this moment of reckoning. The fire crackles louder, sparks spiraling upward like ancient runes. A young pack member, a lithe man with black hair and silver-flecked eyes, offers Casha a cloak lined with wolf fur. She drapes it over her shoulders, the weight of it both protective and symbolic. The fur's coarse hairs prick at her neck, urging her to stand tall in her inheritance. Aa studies Casha for a moment longer, then nods to Reys, who steps from the shadows. His granite-chiseled face softens as he stands beside Casha, a pillar of unwavering support. Together in the circle's center, they form the promised bond. Alpha and heir, protector and protected. A low murmur rises among the pack, greetings in hushed tones, an undercurrent of cautious acceptance. Casha meets each gaze, respect mingled with expectation, loyalty tempered by wariness. She realizes they do not merely welcome her, they judge her readiness, her strength, the depth of her blood. A raises her hand, palm glowing faintly under the moonlight. "Tonight, we mark the return of our bloodline's light," she proclaims. "Elias's daughter stands among us at last." Her eyes sweep the circle, fierce and proud. May her first steps be guided by the spirits of our ancestors. Casha closes her eyes, inhaling the earthy scent of damp moss and pine. The words of her father's journal echo in her mind. Blood is more than memory. It is destiny. Destiny pulses in her veins now, vivid and undeniable. As the pack answers with a unified howl, low, resonant, and primal, Casha feels the legacy stir within her. The city she left behind feels as distant as a dream. Here, in this moonlit sanctuary, she belongs. The fire's glow warms her skin and soul, and in the glow of 1,000 watchful eyes, the daughter of Elias Winter takes her place among the pack. Casha shifts beside the fire, the heat licking her face as sparks drift upward like tiny embers in flight. Aa settles onto a moss-covered log across from her, the fur cloak pooling around her strong frame. As Aa bends to stoke the flames, Casha catches a glint of silver on her shoulder. an intricate scar in the shape of two wolves locked jaw to jaw. Her breath hitches. The scar's silvery sheen almost matches the pale bark of the birches encircling the clearing. Each line of the scar weaves together, tracing a lineage older than words, a symbol of power and responsibility. Casha's pulse quickens as she realizes this is the Alpha's mark, a visible testament to her station, her blood, her connection to something greater. In the flickering light, AA meets Casha's gaze and nods almost imperceptibly, acknowledging her understanding without a word. Liai? Embers crackle like whispered secrets. Casha can feel the pull of the scar's meaning, an unspoken bond that binds Alpha and Heir, leader and legacy. Her heart hammers, caught between awe and an electric thrill she can't name. Reys steps close behind her, dark silhouette outlined by firelight. The scent of pine and storm clings to him, and Casha feels a curious warmth bloom at her spine. His gaze drops to her shoulder, where the key hums quietly against her coat. In that instant, she senses not just his awareness, but something more. A recognition beyond friendship or duty. A's voice cuts through the night's hush, soft, but carrying far. The mark is more than lineage, Casha. It is destiny made flesh. She lifts her arm slightly, revealing the scar's faint luminescence under the moon. But its true power awakens only through the bond of mate. Her voice falters at the forbidden word, as though even she hesitates to speak it aloud. Casha's breath catches on the syllable. Mate. A word laden with taboo and promise, vibrating like a chord struck deep in her chest. The fire's pulse seems to sync with her own, each beat echoing the tremor of possibility. She looks at Reys, seeking confirmation in those molten gold eyes. His stare holds her, unwavering and tender, as though he has been waiting for this confession, this naming of their fate. A sudden gust of wind rustles the pines, scattering embers across the clearing. Casha shivers, not from cold, but from the electric charge weaving through the space between her and Reys. Her rational mind reels. Mate? A destined partner? Too fantastical, too irrevocable. And yet, every fiber of her being cries out in recognition, in longing. Reys steps forward, his presence a grounding force in the swirling storm of her emotions. He kneels beside her, voice a low rumble that rivals the ocean's distant roar. The bond is older than our tongues, he says. It is written in blood and bone. I am bound to you as your mate, as you are bound to me. Each word lands, like a heartbeat against her skin. Casha closes her eyes against the flood of sensations. Warmth, fear, desire, destiny, all crashing together in a single tide. The fire flares, illuminating Reys' silhouette and the soft curve of AA's silver scar. In that moment, everything shifts. The forest, the pack. Even the wind seemed to lean in, bearing witness to the unspoken covenant taking shape. When she opens her eyes, Reys' hand is extended, palm up, invitation and promise intertwined in his outstretched fingers. Casha lifts her own trembling hand to meet his, and the key in her pocket vibrates in joy. The electric pull between them snaps taut, sealing a bond older than memory. A watches them, the corner of her mouth lifting in solemn approval. The pack stirs, a low chorus of approval rolling through the trees. In the heart of the forest, beneath, moonlight and fire, Casha Winter steps fully into her legacy, not just as daughter of Elias, not just as heir to Lupin Blood, but as the mate of her protector. Together they will carry the mark into the coming storm. The moon dipped lower, flooding the clearing with silvery light that danced across the dew-soaked grass. Reys stood close to Casha, his molten gold eyes reflecting every flicker in the fire as he reached out, palm open, inviting her trust. The mating bond thrummed between them, an invisible current that hummed through her veins, setting her skin alight. I'll guide you, he whispered, voice low as the wind through pines. Every step of the bond, its power, its pain, its promise. His words were both reassurance and warning. Casha's heart pounded, a wild drumbeat that matched the rhythm of waves crashing far below. Terror curled in her belly, but beneath it lay a deep, irresistible longing. She lifted trembling fingers to his outstretched hand. The moment their skin met, a pulse of warmth shot up her arm, spreading in luminous tendrils that settled in her chest. Her breath caught, sharp, startled, as if she'd never quite known how to inhale until now. Reys's thumb brushed her palm, slow and deliberate, anchoring her to the moment. This bond is ancient, he said softly, guiding her hand to rest over his heart. It doesn't just bind us in love, it binds our very souls. His chest rose and fell beneath her fingers, each breath a testament to the wildness lurking just beneath human skin. She felt the heat of his life force, raw and unfiltered, seeping into her own. Casha's eyes fluttered shut, overwhelmed by the adrenaline and something deeper, something primal and eternal. A flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Was she ready to surrender to this? The answer came in a whisper of wind that rattled the fire's embers, as though the forest itself urged her on. I don't know if I can, she confessed, voice brittle. Terror lanced through her, fear of losing herself, fear of the transformation ahead. Yet every fiber of her being yearned for the connection Reys offered. He leaned closer, gaze softening. Moonlight traced the line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. It is not always gentle, he admitted, breath hitching at the remembrance of countless first shifts. Bones will crack, flesh will tear. You will howl until your voice splits. His words were stark, a grim promise. But I will be with you. I will hold you as you become what you are. The honesty struck her like a blade. She nodded, tears shimmering at the corners of her eyes. The wind whispered through the trees, and she felt the stirrings of something enormous within her. Ancient power coiling, ready to break free. Reys brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her skin. The contact sent a shudder through her, equal parts comfort and fire. Trust me, he murmured. Trust the bond. Trust me. Her fear gave way to a fierce resolve. She tipped her face toward him, letting the moonlight catch in her tears. I trust you, she said, voice stronger than she felt. I trust us. Slowly, he guided her back, laying her gently on the soft moss at the edge of the clearing. The pack watched in respectful silence, their eyes glowing like distant stars. Casha's pulse thundered, every nerve alive. Reys knelt beside her, his hand trailing across her cheek, down her neck, until he cradled the back of her head. Above them, clouds scuttled across the moon, dusting her with pale light. The mating bond thrummed louder, a living rhythm that wrapped around them, tethering their hearts. Reys pressed his forehead to hers, breath mingling. Breathe with me, he instructed, voice echoing in her bone. She inhaled, filling her lungs with pine-scented air. He exhaled, steady, grounding. They moved together in that breath, the world narrowing to the space where their bodies nearly touched, where the wildness of their legacy pulsed like a second heartbeat. A sudden gust of wind rustled leaves, and Casha felt the first stirrings of power beneath her skin, an electric buzz that made her blood sing. She gasped, eyes wide, and Reys caught her gaze. It's beginning, he said reverently. In the hush of the moonlit night, with firelight flickering and pack shadows surrounding them, Casha surrendered fully. Terror and longing merged into a single ache as the bond drew them together, forging them anew in the timeless dance of Lupin Blood and moonlight. And though the path ahead promised agony as much as ecstasy, she knew one truth above all. She was never alone. The furs beneath her felt both sanctuary and cage as Casha drifted into a fitful sleep. The campfire's embers glowed low outside the hidden forest refuge, but in her mind the full moon blazed bright, spotlighting a world of shifting shapes and pounding hooves. She found herself on a windswept plain, tall grasses bending under a phantom gale. Her body was not her own, but sleek and powerful, limbs a blur of muscle and fur. She raced beneath a sky alight with silver, each footfall sending ripples through the earth. Her heart pounded in time with her stride, every breath a wild exultation. Above her shoulder, silver marks pulsed like living runes, illuminating the runic patterns carved into her new Lupin flesh. A pack moved beside her, ghosts at first, then solid wolves, their eyes bright coals in the moonlight, bodies lithe and fierce. They shouted low howls of challenge and triumph, calling her forward. Casha felt exhilaration bloom alongside a primal dread. These were her brothers and sisters, their strength magnified by the blood she now shared. She pushed harder, lunging, after a phantom stag whose copper coat flashed in and out of view. Each time she closed the distance, the stag dissolved into mist, leaving her lungs aflame and her limbs trembling with frustration. Then the mists coalesced into a cavernous dreamscape. Claw-scarred walls, the scent of damp earth thick as ink, and in the center Reys, towering, inscrutable. His molten gold eyes bored into her, and he whispered a single word, deep as thunder. Awaken. Casha jolted awake, lungs burning, the furs damp beneath her cheek. Distant birds called to the dawn, and the forest's hush pressed in around her. Her fingers trembled as she brushed hair from her face, half expecting to find fur where skin should be. She closed her fists, recalling the taut thrill of those spectral runs. Rising on unsteady knees, she saw the first tendrils of sunrise, sifting through the pines, a pale promise of training to come. Her chest tightened, dread and anticipation warred within her. She remembered the wolf's agony, the crack of bone, the tearing stretch of flesh, yet also the fierce ecstasy of primal power coursing through every nerve. Silver light brushed her shoulders as she uncovered the furs. The alpha's mark pulsed, on her own skin, visible faintly through the sleeve of her shirt, a living tattoo awakening with each pulse of her blood. She traced its shape, two wolves locked in eternal embrace, their eyes gleaming with ancestral fire. The mark's glow rippled beneath her fingertip, echoing the key's hum at her hip. She shivered, though the air was gentle now, warmed by dawn. Casha drew a slow breath, the forest's cool scent grounding her. Training awaited. Her first lesson, in the Lupin world her father once ruled. She would learn to sharpen senses, to bend strength to her will, to tether the wildness within, but most terrifying of all, to survive the first transformation. Pushing herself upright, she wrapped the furs more tightly around her shoulders and stepped toward the edge of the clearing. Reys stood waiting, silhouette etched against the rosy sky, his gaze a steady anchor. He nodded once, solemn and encouraging. Casha's pulse churned, remnants of dream and fear merging with a fierce determination. The forest whispers urged her onward, the pack's eyes upon her even in sleep. Dawn's light crept through the trees, illuminating the path she must walk. With one last glance at the fading embers of the fire, she squared her shoulders. Today, she would step beyond dreams and into reality. Today, she would begin her training under Reys' watchful eye, and claim the Lupin blood that pulsed through her veins. The dawn light filtered through the treetops as Reys led Casha deeper into the woods, his hand brushing hers in a silent promise of guidance. At last, they reached a crystal-clear stream, its water trickling over smooth stones like a soft lullaby. Reys knelt at the water's edge and beckoned Casha closer. "Remove your shoes," he instructed, voice gentle, but firm. Casha hesitated only a moment before slipping off her boots and socks. The cold water seeped between her toes, sending a jolt of awareness up her spine. Reys crouched beside her, his dark hair brushing pine needles as he breathed in deeply. "Close your eyes," he whispered. "Feel the earth beneath you." She obeyed, and the world shifted. No longer did she hear falling leaves or distant birdsong. Each pebble underfoot pressed into her skin, the smooth curve of river rocks, the softness of moss along the bank. Every sensation amplified, the pulsing life of water flowing over her, feet, the tremor of the earth rising up her calves. Reys's presence was a steady warmth at her side, anchoring her in this primal moment. He guided her through each breath. "Inhale deeply," he murmured. "Taste the forest air." Casha drew in a lungs full of pine-tinged breeze, tinged with the sweet undertone of damp earth. "Now exhale your worries," Reys continued, "and let the earth's rhythm become your own." She exhaled, and for a heartbeat, she was more than a librarian, more than a stranger to this world. She was part of it. The water's murmur became a heartbeat. The forest's hush felt like a protective embrace. Her senses sharpened. The distant trill of a thrush, the subtle shift of wind in leaves, the damp brow of a nearby fern. Then, abruptly, a new scent slashed through the serenity, acrid and metallic, like burning wood mingled with something chemical. Casha's eyes snapped open, heart spasming against her ribs. Smoke. Hunter's fire. Reys's head snapped up, nostrils flaring as he inhaled. His golden eyes darkened with alarm. "Hunters are near," he said, voice low and urgent. Without hesitation, he scooped Casha into a crouch behind a thick oak root. Casha's pulse thundered in her ears. The forest floor, moments ago a cradle of calm, now felt like quicksand hungry to swallow them whole. Reys laid a finger across her lips, then dipped his head toward the stream. They listened, the water's steady flow, the distant stomp of heavy boots on leaf-littered earth. Smoke drifted in pale tendrils through the trees, twisting like a warning banner. Casha's breath hitched, fear tightening its grip. She could taste ash on the wind. Her bare feet tingled with cold, yet her newfound connection to the earth screamed at her to run, to hide, to survive. Reys placed a hand on her shoulder, the contact both anchor and lifeline. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "Follow my lead." He rose smoothly, moving with the grace of a shadow, and guided Casha along the stream's edge, where the undergrowth was thickest. Each step was deliberate, hushed, barefoot against the gentle current, reeds brushing ankles like ghostly fingers. Casha's senses flared. She felt each shift in the water's temperature, heard the hunter's boots break twigs in the distance, smelled the burning pine in the air. Her heart pounded, fear and exhilaration interwoven into a single fierce pulse. She glanced at Reys. His gaze was unwavering, golden light steady in the gloom. A crackle of branches ahead snapped her attention. Forward. The hunters were closing in, their voices gravelly murmurs in a language she didn't understand but recognized as threat. Reys pressed closer, lips close to her ear. "We must disappear," he breathed. He led her to a tangle of roots and vines, brushing away loose leaves with one hand, while the other guided her into a shallow hollow. The water lapped at the edge, a silver sentinel shielding them. Casha crouched, chest tight, eyes wide in the half-light. Reys settled beside her, body, a dark sentinel against the hunter's approach. Smoke drifted past, a living thing stamping out the forest's perfume. Casha pressed her cheek to Reys's shoulder, heart pounding in sync with his steady breathing. In that charged silence, she realized the forest's heartbeat had not abandoned her. It had prepared her. Fear still rippled beneath her skin, but so did a fierce determination. She had awakened her senses. Now she would use them to survive. The hunters would learn, if they pressed this far, that its daughter carried Lupin blood and a bond stronger than fear itself. Reys's grip on Casha's hand tightened as they slipped from the stream's edge into a tangle of brambles. The hunters' shouts, low and jagged, echoed through the trees, closer now with every breath. Casha gasped as a thorn snagged her calf, tearing at her jeans and drawing a ribbon of crimson. She stifled a cry, pressing herself against Reys's side. His other hand swept aside the thickest vines, forging a narrow tunnel they could squeeze through. Each step forward was agony. Thorns raked her arms, shoulders, and cheeks, leaving stinging welts that burned in the cool dawn air. Reys paused only once, pressed his palm to her back and whispered, "Almost there." The tunnel sloped downward, muddy and unstable, but it led them away from the hunter's thunderous pursuit. Casha clenched her teeth, letting the pain anchor her to purpose. Survival. A final barrier of briars fought their passage, but Reys's lean muscles bulged as he shoved through, his cloak snagging on barbs and tearing. Casha followed, blood trickling, down her forearm where a stray vine had drawn a line of fire. She emerged into utter darkness, inhaling the dank scent of earth and damp stone. The hunters' voices behind them grew fainter, replaced by the steady drip of water echoing in the tunnel's maw. Reys guided her deeper into the cave, feet splashing in shallow rivulets. The air was cool, so much cooler than the struggle above, and heavy with the promise of safety. Casha's vision adjusted to the gloom, revealing glittering mineral veins in the walls. She sank to her knees, brushing mud from her hands, and let out a long breath that rattled in her chest. Relief flooded her, sharp and sudden. They found a ledge just above a deeper pool, where moss and ferns thrived in the dim light. Reys crouched beside her, his own breathing ragged but controlled. He tore a strip from his cloak and pressed it, gently to her calf wound. The bandage was rough, but the pressure staunched the bleeding. Casha winced, then met his gaze. His golden eyes glowed softly in the darkness, offering comfort without words. Fear still prowled at the edges of her mind. Hunters prowled outside, possibility of betrayal within. But relief outweighed terror, if only for a moment. She pressed her hand to the cool stone wall, marveling at the solid certitude beneath her palm. Here, at least for now, the world's violence was muted by the cave's embrace. A single drip of water echoed like a heartbeat, steady and reassuring. Reys swept a stray lock of hair from her face and murmured, "You did well." His voice was low, threaded with pride and something tender she hadn't yet named. Casha's chest tightened at the intimacy of his praise. Every muscle in her body trembled, from the cold, the pain, and the adrenaline that still pulsed in her veins. Yet in his eyes, she saw the promise of safety and partnership stronger than any hunter's pursuit. She offered him a small, weary smile. "Thank you for not letting go," she whispered. The words felt inadequate for the depth of her gratitude. Reys nodded, then settled back against the cave wall, pulling Casha into a seated embrace. Their shoulders pressed together, sharing warmth and the unspoken vow that they would face whatever came next side by side. Outside, the hunters' voices faded entirely, replaced by the mournful call of a lone owl. Inside the cave, Casha allowed herself to relax into the moment, her breath steadying, her pulse slowing, the pain of her wounds a distant echo. Tomorrow would bring training, transformation, and new dangers. But tonight, they had escaped. And in the quiet, dripping dark, that knowledge was enough to kindle hope and bind their bond ever tighter. Casha pressed her back against the damp cave wall, breathing in the musty scent of earth and the faint mineral tang of hidden springs. Reys knelt beside her, lantern light flickering across his focused features. He tore another strip from his torn cloak, dampening it with cool cave water and gently wiping away the dried blood from the deepest scratch across her forearm. Her skin tingled under his touch, cold moisture giving way to the heat of fresh warmth. As he carefully cleaned the wound, the edges of the scratch began to glow faintly silver, as if the moonlight itself had seeped into her flesh. Casha's heart hammered, half in fear of the unknown, half in anticipation of what this meant. She watched the scar pulse like a heartbeat, threads of luminescence weaving into the pattern of a wolf's silhouette. Reys's golden eyes widened in awe. He leaned closer, every instinct honed on this moment. "Casha, look." His voice was a reverent whisper, echoing softly off the cave walls. "Your mark." She gasped as the glow intensified, the twin wolves entwined on her shoulder, now shining like living runes. The light spilled across her arm, tracing veins of power throughout her body. A warmth unfurled at her core, spreading through her limbs in an electrifying ripple that left her breathless. Her own breath came in shallow gasps, each inhale drawing her deeper into the primal magic coursing beneath her skin. Reys reached out with trembling fingers and traced the scar's outline, careful not to rub away its glow. His touch sent a shockwave of sensation up her spine, a blend of tenderness, lust, and the raw thrill of ancient blood awakened. Casha felt the bond tighten between them, an invisible cord of energy shimmering in the lantern's light. "Power," she murmured, voice trembling. It felt like the universe had shifted on its axis, her human life replaced by something older, wilder. The mark's pulse matched her heartbeat, each throb echoing in her veins. Reys pressed his palm over hers, guiding, her hand against the glowing scar. Their breath mingled, and she felt his warmth, the steady heat of his devotion. A tremor coursed through her as their eyes locked, hers wide with wonder, his fierce with protectiveness and awe. "It's beautiful," Reys breathed, his voice caught in his throat, heavy with emotion. "It's you." Casha let her head fall back against the wall, closing her eyes as the power surged. A low hum thrummed in her ears, like the collective heartbeat of every Lupin who had ever carried the mark. She could feel their legacy pulsing through her, strength, speed, senses beyond human reckoning. Her vision sharpened, even in the dim cave light. She sensed the subtle vibrations of rock and water, the slow twitch of Reys's muscles beside her. Gingerly, she raised her head and met his gaze again. The flickering lantern cast dancing shadows across his face, highlighting the intensity in his eyes. The intimacy of the moment enveloped them both, a sacred rite shared in the hollowed darkness. Reys leaned in, closing the last inches between them. His breath brushed her ear as he whispered, "You're ready." The words were both promise and warning, that the path ahead would demand everything, but they would walk it together. Casha's heart swelled with trust and something deeper. She reached up, cradling the side of his face as the mark on her shoulder burned with newfound brilliance. His pulse flickered beneath her palm, beating in time with hers. In that charged silence, they shared their first tentative kiss, soft and urgent, sealing the awakening of her alpha's power and the unity of their bond. As they parted, the cave seemed to exhale around them. The glow of the mark faded to a steady shimmer, and the palpable electricity between them settled into a quiet warmth. Though danger still lurked beyond the cave's mouth, and trials awaited at dawn, Casha Winter had claimed her legacy, and in the intimate afterglow of the mark's awakening, she and Reys stood ready to face whatever came next, bound by blood, power, and an unbreakable love forged in moonlight. Dawn's pale light had barely touched the sky when Reys led Casha from the cavern's mouth toward a jagged precipice overlooking the churning sea. The path was a narrow ribbon of stone, slick with dew and shadowed by overhanging boulders. With each step, Casha's stomach clenched tighter, her boots slipping on loose gravel, the world below yawning like an abyss. Reys walked beside her, silent and steady, his hand occasionally brushing the small of her back to guide her forward. "Trust the rock," he murmured, voice low and calm as the whisper of the surf. Casha's pulse thundered in her ears, drowning out everything but the pounding of her own terror. Heights had never terrified her so completely. Every gust of wind was a promise of falling, of never catching herself. She pressed her palm to the cold stone wall, fingertips skimming rough texture. The cliff face felt alive beneath her touch, vibrations echoing the sea's constant assault. Reys paused, letting her lean against him, his broad shoulder a shield against the void. "Breathe," he said gently, voice like a warm anchor. She closed her eyes and drew in a shaky breath, tasting salt and minerals. When she opened her eyes, the world tilted with vertigo. A sheer drop of 100 feet, waves crashing below in a deafening roar. Her knees trembled, and she crouched, lowering her center of gravity. Reys knelt beside her, his golden gaze steady. He reached out, thumb brushing her cheek. "You can do this," he promised. "I'm right here." She nodded, tears of fear pricking at the corner of her eyes. Steeling herself, she rose, step by careful step. Each movement felt monumental, placing her foot on narrow ledges, using her hands to grip sturdy holds. Reys mirrored her pace, never outpacing her, always a heartbeat behind, ready to catch her if she slipped. His presence was a lifeline, a promise that she need never face this alone. Halfway up, a loose stone skittered under her boot. Her breath caught, an instinct flared. She wanted to flee, to crawl back into the forest's safety. But Reys's voice cut through the panic. "Look at me," he said. She lifted her gaze to those molten eyes, filled with unwavering faith. Her breath steadied, and she followed his direction, shifting her weight, finding new grips. The world righted itself, at least enough for her to continue. When they finally reached the narrow ledge at the cliff's crest, Casha's legs wobbled under her weight. Reys extended his hand without a word, and she took it, feeling the heat of his palm against her chilled fingers. They stood side by side, shoulders nearly touching, the ocean's roar a throbbing heartbeat beneath them. For a moment, they simply stood, two silhouettes carved against the rising sun. The adrenaline coursing through Casha's veins was intoxicating, turning her fear into a fierce triumph. Reys's steady hand never wavered, a tangible proof of his protection, his unwavering support. She pressed her forehead to his shoulder, the rough fabric of his tunic grounding her. He wrapped an arm around her waist, drawing her close against the wind. The air smelled of salt and promise. In his embrace, Casha felt the tumult in her mind settle into clarity. The terror that had threatened to consume her had been tempered by his confidence, his quiet strength. "You did it," Reys whispered against her hair. "You faced the cliff, and you conquered it." She lifted her head, meeting his gaze. The sun ignited the horizon in gold and rose, illuminating the jagged rocks and the endless sea beyond. In that radiant light, something shifted between them, a bond forged in shared peril, deepened by vulnerability and trust. Casha's lips curved into a tired, triumphant smile. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. Reys's smile was slow and warm, pride shining in his eyes. "You had the strength all along," he said softly. "I only showed you where to find it." They stood together on that precarious ledge, hearts pounding in unison, bound by the adrenaline of the climb and the depth of their connection. The world below remained wild and unforgiving, but here, on this edge of dawn and danger, Casha Winter realized that with Reys by her side, even the greatest heights could become a sanctuary of possibility. Dark clouds churned overhead as Casha and Reys broke from the cliff's edge, urgency propelling their descent. Each thunderclap shattered the dawn's quiet, a savage drum urging them forward. The sky cracked open, and sheets of rain hammered the forest floor, transforming familiar roots and stones into slick treachery. Reys moved with purpose, hand gripping Casha's wrist, guiding her through the roaring tempest. The wind whipped their cloaks into banners of shadow. Branches bent and groaned, lashing at them like frantic hands. Casha's heart pounded. The forest, once a sanctuary of moss and dappled light, had become a labyrinth of danger and disorientation. They plunged into a tangle of ferns, where water sluiced in miniature rivulets. Footing vanished beneath mud that sucked at their boots. Casha's breath came in staccato gasps as she fought the twin forces of exhaustion and fear. Every sense screamed, the electric tang of ozone on her tongue, the sting of rain pelting her cheeks, the distant roar of water swelling in rivulets, now grown to angry streams. Reys called her name above the storm's din, and she obeyed, following his lead through the thrashing greenery. The thunder rattled in her bones as lightning split the sky, revealing glimpses of twisted trunks and hidden gullies. A bolt illuminated a massive oak, its roots uprooted and draped like the limbs of a fallen giant. Casha flinched, pressed closer, to Reys, trusting his steady presence. Branches snapped behind them, hunters' torches, or forest itself writhing in the storm's fury. She couldn't tell. The path they'd carved earlier was erased by the deluge, indistinguishable under the torrent. Panic flared. Each wrong step could send her tumbling into a root-strewn ravine. Reys' voice cut through the chaos. "This way!" He plunged downhill, finding a faint animal track that snaked toward the pack's clearing. Casha followed, trusting his instincts, though her muscles burned and the rain blurred her vision. The world had narrowed to the thunder above, the mud below, and the fierce grip of Reys' hand. A sudden blast of wind slammed them sideways, and Casha braced herself against the rock face. Pain spiked as a jagged branch tore at her arm, but she forced herself to swallow a cry. Reys steadied her, pressing a finger to her lips. "We're almost there," he promised, voice a fierce rumble. The tree line gave way at last, opening onto a muddy glade where the pack's lanterns flickered, like distant beacons. The fire they'd left smoldered under its collapsed canopy, and worried figures moved through the rain toward them. Casha stumbled forward, relief flooding her limbs even as exhaustion threatened to pull her under. Aa emerged from the circle, cloak-drenched, silver hair plastered to her cheeks, her ice-blue eyes narrowed against the downpour. "You made it," she called, voice both relief and reproach. The pack surged forward, hands reaching out to steady Casha, to help her to her feet. Warm blankets and herbal salves appeared, cradling her trembling body. Reys stayed at her side, shielding her from the worst of the rain. He brushed wet strands of hair from her face, concern etched into every line of his features. Casha met his gaze, seeing in his golden eyes a blend of pride and lingering fear. The storm had tested them, warped the forest into something alien, but it had also driven them home. Thunder rolled one last time, a resonant clap that shook the clearing's tethered hope. Yet around the smoldering fire, humanity held firm, heartbeats in unison against nature's wrath. Casha pressed a hand to her soaked coat, feeling the damp warmth of the pack's life beneath her fingertips. The weight of legacy, the strength of community, and the unbreakable bond that Reys had forged in moonlight and trial. As the wind howled overhead and rain streamed through the broken canopy, Casha Winter, scarred, exhausted, exhilarated, knew this was no longer only her story. The pack's fate was now entwined with hers, and together they would weather any storm. The first clang of axe on steel rang out like a death knell as the pack surged into the clearing. Casha skidded to a halt behind Alpha AA, her chest hammering beneath the wet fur cloak. Around her, the grotesque hunters, a twisted half-breed, horde clad in scavenged leather and bristling with crude axes and strange, humming devices. Closed ranks, eyes burning red under dripping hoods. AA's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold the line!" The Alpha's form blurred, bones creaking and reshaping in a shred of moonlight. In one brutal moment, AA was no longer human but a massive silver wolf, teeth bared in a growl that cracked the air. She sprang into the hunter's flank, fangs sinking into leather, ripping flesh with feral precision. At Casha's side, Reys moved like a shadow made flesh. His clothes shredded, limbs elongating into a dark-furred wolf twice Casha's height. His golden eyes flared with primal fury as he launched himself at the nearest hunter, claws flashing. A guttural roar tore from his throat, sending a hunter's axe spinning from numb fingers. Casha's throat went dry. The rain-slicked grass was slick with mud and the hunter's blood. Somewhere in the roar of battle, her brain searched for a weapon. Anything. But all she had was the scorching panic in her veins. The key at her belt vibrated, urging her onward, and deep within her chest, she felt the first tremor of transformation. Bone kneading against sinew, blood calling her name. A hunter swung an axe toward AA's flank, steel whistling inches from fur. AA whipped around in a blur, fangs clipping sinew, collapsing the attacker in a heap of broken bones. Reys intercepted another hunter's advance, smashing through a dark device that sputtered sparks, an arcane instrument designed to track Lupin's scent. Casha stumbled forward, compelled by the blood-charged tide. She reached for her father's journal, pages splayed on the ground, lit by intermittent lightning. The chronicles of the Lupin Blood lay open, diagrams of claws and howls etched in faded ink. Her fingers brushed the words, "First shift, embrace the pack," just as a hunter lunged at her from the side. Reys hurled himself between them, jaws snapping inches from the hunter's throat. The hunter recoiled, disarmed, as Reys pinned him to the muddy earth. Blood dripped from Reys's muzzle, warm and coppery, painting the hunter's face in Lupin victory. A's Lupin form tore across the battlefield with ruthless grace, rallying the pack into a deadly dance of fangs and fury. Half human, half wolf, the pack counterattacked with a rhythm Casha had never known but somehow understood, the thunder of paws matching the beating of many hearts. Yet, as the thunderstorm raged overhead, Casha felt her own heartbeat slow and deepen. A warmth blossomed beneath her skin, radiating outward from her shoulder where the silvery scar glowed in the lightning flashes. Her breath hitched, vision shimmering at the edges. Hands trembling, she pressed a palm to a jagged rock for balance. A guttural howl rose around her as the pack formed a protective circle. AA, Silver Wolf, and Reys, Obsidian Titan, stood guard, flank and flank. Pack members, hunters turned prey, fought, with renewed ferocity, their loyalty a bulwark against the horde's onslaught. Casha's legs wobbled with the tremors of her nascent shift. Pain lanced in her spine as her bones stretched, joints popping with dreadful pressure. She collapsed to one knee, journal falling from numb fingers. Rain washed the ink from the pages, but the words burned brighter in her mind. Trust the bond. Embrace the blood. Reys glanced back, noticing her staggering form. His wolf head tilted in concern, golden eyes blazing with fierce encouragement. AA's lupine growl softened to a low promise. We protect you. In that moment, Casha's fear and yearning collided. She closed her eyes against the roaring storm and let the agony wash over her. The splintering pain of transformation. Around her, the pack howled in solidarity, the hunters' numbers dwindling under alpha fury. As her vision darkened and her heart slowed into Lupin rhythm, Casha Winter's cry joined the chorus, a raw, primeval howl that sealed her initiation in the Battle of the Forgotten. A searing pain lanced through Casha's spine, as though every bone were fracturing in slow motion. She gasped, hands clawing at the mud-slick earth, fingers scraping shallow grooves as her vision splintered into shards of agony and wonder. Around her, the Battle of the Forgotten raged on, AA's silver wolf form shredding leather-armored hunters, Reys' ebony fur a whirlwind of jaws and claws. But for Casha, the world had narrowed to one blistering point of transformation, her, back-arched, spine cracking like a whip. Muscles tore and rewove themselves beneath her skin, elongating into powerful sinew. The fur blossomed in a silver sheen, every strand igniting with Lupin magic. She felt her ribs flare outward, then contract, lungs expanding to drink in storm-charged air, primed for a howl that even she could not yet imagine. Panic clawed at her throat. She tried to cry out, but only a wet, feral gasp emerged. Teeth, razor-sharp and glinting, forced their way forward, shoving her lips apart. She tasted iron and rain, and something deeper. Herself, at the first terrifying moment of true awakening. Her hands curled into paws, knuckles swelling into pads that pressed into the cool mud. The last vestiges of humanity slipped away in a delirious rush of instinct. The battlefield stilled in that heartbeat. Reys' massive wolf form froze mid-attack, golden eyes flicking back to where Casha writhed. AA's lupine ears flattened. Everything savored the seismic shift in the forest's heartbeat. Even the grotesque hunters seemed to reel at the primal vibration rolling over the clearing, a tremor that grew into resonance. Casha's head lifted as her senses exploded. She tasted the salt of sweat and fear, smelled the acrid stench of burning wood and hunter's oil, heard each pack member's heartbeat like a drumbeat in her chest. The wind's roar faded beneath the thunder of her new Lupin pulse. And then, a howl rose. A sound at once joyous and terrible, cutting through storm and slaughter alike. Her howl echoed against cragged stone walls and ancient trees, a clear, echoing call that carried the weight of her lineage. It rolled over the pack, a promise of power and protection, and it ripped through the hunters, fracturing their murderous resolve. Some hunters stumbled, weapons slack in numb hands. Others froze, horror wide in their red eyes as the silver wolf stood fully formed. Casha's new body trembled with the aftershock of voice. Strong, resonant, alive. She blinked her golden-flecked eyes, taking in the dance of moonlight on her silken pelt. Every step she took was sure and fluid. Her paws found solid purchase without thought. Reys padded toward her, muzzle brushing hers in a greeting of loyalty and shared triumph. AA bounded over, wolf form agile and regal, nose nudging Casha's flank. The scent of her pack surged, comforting, familiar, fierce. Casha felt belonging, bloom within her chest, a fierce warmth chasing away the last flickers of fear. Her howl had changed everything, reminded the pack of its strength, unmade the hunter's onslaught, and claimed her irrevocably as one of them. For a heartbeat, Casha savored the raw ecstasy of power, the surge of muscle, the sharp clarity of sight, the heightened awareness of life pulsing in every root and leaf. Then her gaze found Reys, molten gold in a sea of silver. In that instant, she understood the true depth of their bond. Mate and alpha, protector and heir, entwined by blood and moonlight. Around them, the pack rallied, wolves and Lupin shifters moving as one. Reys roared, a jubilant cry that merged with Casha's own, and together they charged back into the fray. The hunters, unprepared for this united front of Lupin fury, scattered beneath talons and teeth. AA led the vanguard, Reys beside her, and Casha found herself at their side. No longer the terrified librarian on borrowed blood, but a silver-furred alpha in her own right. The thunderstorm rumbled its approval overhead as the battle turned. Casha's first shift had shattered the hunter's will, stunned friend and foe, and confirmed her place among the pack. Her primal howl lingered on the wind, a clarion call of transformation and triumph. In that moment, fur gleaming, heart roaring, Casha Winter embraced her destiny. No longer merely daughter of Elias, but the silver-fanged heir who would lead her pack through storm and shadow alike. Silver-furred and roaring with newly mastered power, Casha launched herself into the heart of the fray. Beside Reys' ebony mass, she moved with a grace that belied her fledgling Lupin form, muscles coiling and releasing in perfect harmony with her packmates. The hunters, once confident in their axes and dark devices, faltered at the sight of two massive wolves cutting through their ranks like living blades. Reys met her flank, a synchronized pounce that sent two hunters sprawling into the mud. Casha's claws flashed, ripping through leather and bone in a single fluid motion. The taste of victory, iron and rain, danced on her tongue. Her ears caught Reys' deep, encouraging growl, and she mirrored it, unleashing a war cry that rattled the trees. This howl was different from her first, raw and untested. Now it was honed by purpose and unity, each vibration a rallying cry for the pack. Around her, wolves answered with resonant howls, a living chorus that surged like wildfire. Through the line of battle, the hunters instinctively recoiled, confusion and fear breaking their ranks. Casha charged forward, eyes blazing a fierce gold. A hunter raised a trembling device, its humming notes slicing the air, but she struck first, jaws clamping around his weapon, wrenching it from his hand, teeth grinding metal into useless shards. He crumpled, howling in defeat as Casha released him, pressing on without hesitation. Reys circled back, crossing shoulder with shoulder. Their connection was palpable, an invisible thread of trust and shared destiny. She felt his strength bolster, her own, a silent vow echoing in every beat of her heart. Together, they would forge the future of Hollow's Edge. Alpha AA burst through the fray in her lupine glory, silver coat glinting under roiling clouds. She barreled into the center of the hunters' formation, scattering them like frightened crows. Casha followed her lead, feeling the power of lineage pulsing beneath her pelt. Each step she took, each swipe of her claws, carried the weight of her father's legacy and the promise of her own rising leadership. A hunter lunged at AA from behind, but Casha was there, intercepting the blow with a fang-clenched jaw on the attacker's shoulder, driving him off balance. AA turned mid-claw, eyes locking with Casha's in a moment of wordless approval. Casha felt her chest swell with pride and belonging. She was no longer the outsider librarian. She was one of them, a warrior in training, an heir destined to wear the Alpha's mantle. Lightning forked overhead, illuminating the blood-spattered clearing. In that flickering silver light, Casha glimpsed herself as she truly was, a force of nature unleashed, howl still echoing, eyes alight with Lupin, fire. She spread her forelegs and reared, letting loose a final triumphant cry that shattered the hunter's resolve. The remaining foes fled into the underbrush, defeated by a unity of wolves no single weapon could match. As the echoes faded, the pack gathered around Casha and Reys, forming a protective circle. AA stepped beside them, silver fur brushing against Casha's flank. The three wolves, Alpha in training, and Mate, stood as a living testament to the power of their bond. Reys nudged Casha gently, golden gaze soft with pride. She nuzzled him in return, the warmth of his bond a balm after the storm of battle. AA's low rumble of approval echoed like rolling thunder, acknowledging Casha's first taste of warrior might. Panting, Casha shifted back toward her human form, fur receding to pale skin and ragged clothing beneath. Yet the warrior within remained, every muscle a memory of the fight, every heartbeat a promise of guardianship. Her transformation had been agonizing but necessary, cementing her destiny as the pack's next leader. As the pack regrouped under the parting clouds, Casha felt the weight of her legacy settle into her shoulders, no longer a burden, but a prideful emblem of who she was and who she would become. Side by side with Reys, and guided by AA's wisdom, she was ready to lead the Hollow's Edge pack into whatever storms awaited. The rain had stopped, but the air still trembled with electricity as the pack gathered around AA's makeshift infirmary. Dappled lantern light glinted off silver fur and rain-slicked pelts. Wounded Lupin and wolf shifters lay on furs and mossy blankets, muscles stiff and breaths ragged, yet their eyes shone with fierce triumph. The Battle of the Forgotten had tested them hard, but they stood undefeated. Casha, still humming with residual adrenaline, knelt beside a young pack member whose thigh bore shallow axe gashes. She pressed a healing salve, her touch gentle, her newfound Lupin strength steady and sure. Reys hovered close, one hand on her shoulder, concern etched in his molten gold gaze. "You've done well," he murmured, voice low as the drip of water from the cave walls. She offered him a weary smile, eyes reflecting both pride and the weight of what lay ahead. Around them, AA moved with graceful authority, her silver lupine form briefly shifting back to human as she checked on wounds and dispensed commands. Under her leadership, the pack's beating hearts synchronized into an unspoken harmony of survival and solidarity. Nearby, rattles and whimpers rose as the last hunters were dispatched, fleeing into the night's shadows. When AA gave the signal, the pack howled, a unified, defiant chorus that echoed off gnarled trunks and moss-coated stones. The sound rolled through the clearing like thunder, a declaration that Hollow's Edge would not bow to fear. Casha rose to her feet, the lunar mark on her shoulder still warm beneath her damp shirt. She inhaled deep, tasting pine smoke and rain-soaked earth, the very essence of her Lupin inheritance. Reys joined her side, and together they surveyed the scene. Wolves tending wolves, packmates tending packmates, the broken and the brave united by trials overcome. For a moment, the world held its breath. Even the wind stilled, as though eager to hear the pack's collective resolve. AA's voice cut through the hush. "Rest now, all of you. Injuries must heal, and minds must gather strength." Her gaze lingered on Casha, a silent benediction passing between two leaders bound by blood and destiny. As the pack dispersed to find medical herbs and kindling for a roaring fire, Casha and Reys lingered at the edge of the clearing. The canopy overhead shivered with the first hints of moonlight breaking through scattered clouds. Reys handed her a steaming cup of herb-infused broth, the scent of pine needles in every sip, then wrapped his cloak around her shoulders. "You're stronger than you know," he whispered, brushing fingers over the faint shimmer of her alpha's mark. "Today, you proved yourself." Her heart thumped, a slow, steady drum of triumph and resolve. "We proved ourselves," she corrected softly, leaning into his warmth. The bond between them pulsed under moonlight, a living thread woven through fight and fear and newfound glory. Just then, the forest fell eerily silent. The distant crackle of leaves ceased, the chatter of crickets hushed, and even the gentle lap of rain in hollowed leaves seemed to pause in deference to what came next. And then, across the dark tree line, a single howl sliced through the night. It was a voice both familiar and foreign, raw with pain, laced with sorrow, threaded through with rage. It carried a name neither syllable nor whisper. Lyra. Casha's breath caught in her throat. Reys stiffened beside her, golden eyes narrowing as he listened to the echoing call. AA's packmates paused, ears pricking in shared recognition. The sister who had been lost, the sister who had been promised redemption. Her voice rang out, across the cliffs and forest, a summons no one could ignore. Casha's chest tightened. The howl was unfinished, an open question trailing on the wind. Secrets yet lay buried in Elias Winter's legacy, in Lyra's banishment, and the dark magic that had twisted her blood. The next chapter of their story beckoned, rich with promise and peril. Reys placed a hand against her heart, steadying the rush of storm-born emotion. "It's her," he said, voice hushed. "She's calling you." Casha lifted her chin, silver eyes bright with determination. "Then we answer." As the pack rallied around their emerging alpha, a new dawn of purpose and promise stirred in Hollow's Edge. The night still hummed with the distant echo of an unfinished howl, an invitation to uncover buried truths and face the shadows of their shared bloodline. And Casha Winter, Healer turned warrior, daughter turned alpha in training, braced herself for the journey to come.